This is Lee Phillips. I'm an attorney. Actually, I'm a counselor to the United States Supreme Court. And I've been doing a series for you on the elements of a corporation and an LLC. A corporation has four elements. An LLC basically gets to choose two of the four. That makes it so that it's not a corporation under the eyes of the law, and under the IRS's eyes particularly. The four elements are limited liability, transferability, continuity of life, and centralized management. And there are other YouTube videos on each one of those. This one is on limited liability. Limited liability is the one you're always going to choose in your LLC. If you get to choose two, I want the limited liability. What it does is it protects you, the officer, owner, manager of the LLC or the corporation, from what happens within the corporation. The liabilities of the corporation are within the corporation. They don't jump over the corporation and come to you. Therefore, your personal assets aren't at risk when the corporation has a liability. Somebody slips and falls, there's a lawsuit, there's a mortgage, whatever. That's in the company, not in your realm. So you have to be careful as to whether or not you're playing with the company or whether or not you're playing with yourself. Now, the corporate shield or the limited liability is exactly the same as the LLC limited liability. Basically, when they created an LLC, they took a little genetic piece of the corporation and inserted it into the LLC. So the corporate shield is the same whether it's an LLC or whether it's a corporation. In the corporation, you have formalities, and I have a checklist of 27 of these formalities that you should be doing in order to maintain the corporation, this corporate shield, this limited liability. You can't commingle the money. You have to pay your state fees. You have to have your meetings. You have to take notes of meetings. It goes on and on and on. When you get into court, whether you're a corporation or an LLC, they're always going to say, well, Your Honor, this isn't a real company. This is just his alter ego. It's an extension of you. You have to prove to the court, no. I treated this as a real company. It's a real company. The way you prove to the court that it's a real company is you go through these formalities. Now, I'm going to give it to you. There are actually states that have passed laws which say, hey, you get the corporate shield, can't lose the corporate shield in an LLC because you haven't followed the corporate formalities. Well, practically speaking, when you get into court, you've still got to prove that this is a real company and not your alter ego. And the way you do that is through these formalities. So even if the state law says, don't need to follow the formalities, I would still be following the formalities. Because if you don't treat it like a real company, the courts don't have to treat it like a real company, and they do what's called pierce the corporate veil and come right through that shield and say, okay, have at this guy's personal assets. We don't care about the company. Yeah, you can have the company assets too, but get his too. So that's the problem when you get into court with the corporate shield, proving you treated it as a real company and they should have treated it as a real company and protected you. Now, obviously, the big companies, IBM and all those guys, they don't have to worry about treating it as a real company. They're real companies, big companies. But the smaller companies, one or two or three owners, then it comes into question. What did you do? Is it really a company? And you prove it with this checklist of formalities. And we'll do a different series on the checklist of formalities for you. The limited liability in a little company is often a scam. Now, I said the mortgages and things, the accounts receivable and things in IBM, there's no individual that's responsible for those, even if the corporate shield is pierced. Well, it's not going to be pierced, but they're not liable. In a small company, the mortgage company, the accounts receivable at Home Depot or Office Supplies or whoever, they're always going to have the owner sign personally. So in a sense, most of the major liabilities in a small company, you're not protected from anyway, because when the liability was set up and occurred, you signed personally on it. So they've just gone out and around the corporate shield anyway. However, there are many cases where the corporate shield is very valuable and you need to keep it up. You then get the limited liability that the government promised. And by the way, do you really think the government is interested in protecting your assets? I don't think so. That's why they've made it so you have to jump all these hurdles in order to prove in court that it's a real company and I should get the limited liability. Let's make sure that you follow all the formalities and do the things that you need to do in order to keep your company separate from your personal lives.